Family court orders are intended to create safety and predictability for children. However, when these documents rely on open-ended phrasing, they create a legal vacuum. In high-conflict dynamics, this allows one party to redefine the rules in real time, effectively transforming a protective order into a mechanism for continued control. Legal drafting often relies on the theory of healthy flexibility. This model assumes both parents possess equal power and will operate in good faith to adapt to normal daily disruptions, like traffic delays or childhood illnesses. That assumption fails in high-conflict dynamics. When coercive control or severe power imbalances exist, standard boiler language provides an exploitable loophole for the dominant party. This dynamic produces weaponized ambiguity. In a healthy system, similar behaviors yield identical consequences. If either parent runs late, the schedule adapts symmetrically. Under weaponized ambiguity, the stronger party dictates the rules. The same input yields wildly different consequences depending on who acts. The immediate legal consequence for the targeted parent is a chronic state of risk. Standard logical parenting actions, like setting a routine boundary or asking a clarifying question, trigger persistent threats of violation and court action. Psychologically, this forces the targeted parent into a state of learned helplessness. They face financial exhaustion from responding to endless, frivolous complaints, realizing that no matter what action they take, it will be framed as noncompliance. The children trapped in these systems internalize a dangerous lesson. They learn that written rules hold no actual weight, and that power supersedes fairness. In high-conflict dynamics, ambiguous legal language facilitates systemic abuse by providing the institutional mechanism for continued control. Weaponized ambiguity begins at the drafting table. Attorneys, mediators, and judges frequently rely on outdated templates and the path of least resistance, copying old clauses without considering how they function in a hostile environment. This vague drafting creates a procedural loop driven by narrative anchoring. Step 1 establishes the vague directive, like communicate respectfully, alongside the initial labeling of one parent as difficult or high conflict. The narrative anchor is set. Step 2 occurs when a standard conflict trigger arises. For example, the targeted parent submits a logical, neutral request to establish a medication tracking system for the child. In Step 3, the opposing parent delivers an asymmetrical response. They ignore the logistics, insult the targeted parent, and claim the mere request constitutes harassment. Step 4 closes the confirmation bias loop. Evaluators and professionals often pathologize the targeted parent's request while leaving the other parent's aggression unaddressed. This psychological loop manifests directly in the courtroom through procedural weaponization. The favored parent can now file repeated, frivolous contempt motions based entirely on their subjective interpretation of what constitutes a disrespectful message, forcing the targeted parent into a constant defensive posture. Disparities in wealth, time, and legal literacy allow the abusive parent to run this loop continuously. They can afford to hire experts and file motions until the targeted parent's resources are entirely depleted. Without objective definitions in the initial order, the family court ecosystem will continuously mistake a targeted parent's reaction to injustice as definitive proof of their instability. Neutralizing narrative anchoring requires shifting the legal focus from policing a parent's tone to mandating specific, observable behaviors. We can neutralize ambiguity by examining two critical categories. First, communication directives. Consider the standard clause. Parents shall communicate respectfully. Respectful is an unmeasurable metric. It invites manipulation because honest feedback can easily be labeled as disrespect by a bad faith actor. The concrete alternative eliminates tone entirely. It restricts communication to a designated parenting app, limits the subject to logistics, and establishes strict operational hours. This requires negative constraints. The clause must explicitly ban profanity, name-calling, and referencing past relationship issues, leaving zero room for interpretation regarding what constitutes a violation. The second critical category for overhaul is parenting time schedules. Standard vague clauses like reasonable parenting time or fair sharing grant unilateral veto power to the parent with more resources. They can stonewall access and still claim their behavior is reasonable. The concrete behavioral alternative defines exact days, specific hour-to-hour transition times, and exact physical locations for exchanges. These clauses must include micro-protocols to handle inevitable disruptions, such as a mandatory rule to notify the other parent via the designated app if delayed by more than 15 minutes. Defining the exact who, what, where, when, and how entirely removes the interpretive latitude required to weaponize standard logistics. Joint decision-making mandates present specific structural risks. Directives requiring parents to act jointly or agree are catastrophic when one parent's primary objective is to obstruct the other. Analyze the standard mandate. Parents shall make major decisions jointly. Failing to define the word major allows a bad faith actor to claim veto power over every aspect of the child's life, from routine school activities to a simple haircut. The first step in building a concrete alternative is providing an explicit, exhaustive list of what qualifies as a major decision. The second step establishes a rigid communication protocol for these specific categories. It requires the proposing parent to submit a written request bound by a strict 5-business-day response window for the other party. The final step procedurally engineers a default tiebreaker mechanism. This automatically activates the moment the 5-day window expires or the parents formally disagree. Tiebreaker mechanisms can default to the recommendation of a child's established medical provider or mandate a single, time-bound mediation session before any court filing can occur. Installing these rigid procedural timelines prevents chronic anxiety. It stops bad faith actors from using open-ended delays as a mechanism for control. A robust legal order procedurally engineers the resolution of disputes. By defining the outcome of a disagreement before it occurs, the order prevents a bad faith actor from using open-ended delays as a form of control. For targeted parents currently trapped within a vague order, immediate survival requires shifting from emotional reactions to data collection. Strategic documentation focuses on the asymmetrical application of the rules. Recording how the same behavior leads to different outcomes for each parent creates a factual record of the systemic double standard. This image displays the required architecture for a protective record log. It tracks the specific date, the exact vague clause involved, a factual description of the event, and the resulting asymmetrical professional outcome. This sequence links initial factual events to biased professional outcomes, establishing a factual record of systemic coercion. Targeted parents must also document every formal request made to attorneys or judges asking for clarity. This establishes a paper trail proving a good faith attempt to comply and reduce conflict. A clear standard for all legal professionals is the stranger test. If an order is handed to a third party with zero context about the family's history, would they know exactly what physical behavior is required at any given moment? If the answer is no, the order is dangerous. Mediators, guardians ad litem, and judges must actively scrutinize how standard clauses are cited differently against competing narratives, checking their confirmation bias before issuing penalties. Ambiguity cannot be viewed as an opportunity for future collaboration when one party views the legal system merely as a theater for continued abuse. Restoring safety to the family court ecosystem requires replacing subjective adjectives with rigid, time-bound behavior.